All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating and honestly pretty chilling piece of speculative fiction. It's a dialogue set after the collapse of a democracy that reads like an after-action report trying to figure out, well, where did it all go wrong?
And boom, the source material just throws us right into the deep end with this opening line. This isn't some abstract political debate, it's a postmortem. We're 14 years into the future, and the United States is gone, replaced by something called the Consolidated American Authority.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the two characters having this post-collapse reckoning. Then we'll dig into the technocrats' argument for why democracy had to go. After that, we'll hear the powerful counter-argument about democracy's real purpose, see how these ideas lead to two totally different philosophies for survival, and then wrap up with the final after-action report on the collapse itself.
Okay, let's get into part one, a post-collapse reckoning. The whole thing is basically a conversation between two academics, two old colleagues who found themselves on completely opposite sides when their society started to come apart at the seams.
So on one side, you've got Dr. Vance. He's a brilliant guy who basically decided democracy was fundamentally broken and that voters just couldn't be trusted. So he joined the new authoritarian regime as an advisor. And on the other side, you have Dr. Caraway. She's a former law professor, now in hiding, who argues that for all its messiness, democracy served a purpose that was absolutely vital. The whole conversation, really, it all boils down to one single question. How in the world did we get here?
Now for part two, let's explore the technocrats' thesis. This is Dr. Vance's big idea, his justification for everything. He argues that the problem wasn't a specific policy or a political party. No, the problem was the entire system of democracy itself.
And Vance really doesn't pull any punches with this quote. His point is that modern problems, think climate change, pandemics, global economics, are just way too complex for the average person to grasp. He basically says our brains evolved for small-scale village life, not for making decisions on a planetary scale. For him, it's a fatal design flaw.
So what's his fix? Well, he calls it managed participation. The core idea is pretty simple, actually. You take power away from the general public and you give it to a small, elite group of experts who have all the best data. The goal is to optimize governance, to run a country like a finely tuned machine, not a messy town hall meeting.
And this is really the key to his whole argument. He reframes the entire purpose of government. He says it's not about messy things like consent or legitimacy. For him, governing is basically a massive computational problem. And if you've got a data problem, you don't ask for opinions, you find the people with the most powerful computers.
But of course, there's a counter-argument. And in Section 3, we get Caraway's powerful rebuttal. She basically says Vance's entire argument is built on a huge misunderstanding. He's totally missed the point of what democracy is actually for.
And this, right here, this slide, just lays it all out, doesn't it? For Vance, democracy is a machine for getting the right answers. It's an optimization problem. But for Caraway, nope, that's not its job. For her, democracy is an error correction mechanism. It's a peaceful way for a society to realize it's heading in the wrong direction and change course without having a civil war.
And this is where Caraway lays down her starkest warning. That vote, that messy, inefficient process, that was the feedback loop. That was the pressure release valve for the whole system. And by getting rid of it to make things more efficient, Vance's new regime didn't create stability. Oh no. They guaranteed that when things eventually went wrong, and they always do, the failure wouldn't be gradual. It would be catastrophic.
And as for that whole argument about we need to be efficient, we need to move fast, she just calls it out for what it is. She says this is the oldest line in the book, the thing people always say right before they grab power that they have absolutely no intention of ever giving back. For her, the slow, messy process, that is the whole point.
Okay, so let's bring this down from the clouds a bit. How does this super abstract debate actually play out on the ground? Well, in Section 4, the source gives us two incredible metaphors to think about, the billionaire bunker versus the community storehouse.
So you end up with two completely different roadmaps for survival. Vision 1 is the sovereign individual. The goal here is just personal survival. You hoard what you can for you and yours, and the end game is a fortified bunker, sealed off from the world. Vision 2 is the covenant community. Here, the goal is for the community to survive. Resources are pooled, shared. It's about building a bigger table, not a higher fence.
Let's really dig into this sovereign individual mindset because it's fascinating. The core belief is that pure self-reliance is the highest virtue. The social contract, the idea that we owe something to each other, is seen as a burden you need to escape.
It's this belief that you build your wealth all by yourself in a vacuum, and so you owe nothing to the society that made it possible. The text has a perfect phrase for it: free riding followed by gate closing, and its ultimate expression, a modern-day feudal castle.
Now, the covenant community model, which the text uses the example of the LDS or Mormon preparedness system to illustrate, it's a total 180. Here, the social contract isn't a burden, it's the infrastructure of survival. The whole point of being self-reliant isn't just to save yourself, it's so you're strong enough to have the capacity to serve others when the time comes. This is a culture built on mutual obligation, and its final form isn't a castle, but a functioning republic.
So that brings us to the big finale, the after-action report. This is where they put on their detective hats and trace the steps back. How did this actually happen? What were the clear warning signs that everyone saw but ignored?
And what they find is this: it wasn't one single event. It was a slow-motion train wreck over about a decade. It started with a decision that equated money with speech. Then you had technology used to carve up voting districts so that compromise became impossible. Then social media came along and shattered any sense of a shared reality. And it all culminated in the final fatal blow: a major political movement simply deciding it would no longer accept losing an election.
So they boil it all down to these 5 what they call terminal red flags. And number 1, that's the big one, a movement refusing to accept electoral loss. Vance calls that the point of no return. But the others are just as critical. When emergency powers stop being temporary, when we can't agree on basic facts anymore, when local community life just withers away, and maybe most chillingly, when the people who should be persuading each other start treating each other with contempt instead.
And after all this, after this whole debate, we get this just jaw-dropping admission from Dr. Vance himself. He sees the results of his grand experiment, and he finally admits his entire worldview was a catastrophic failure. His quest for optimization, by cutting out that messy accountability piece, didn't create a utopia. It created, in his own unforgettable words, tyranny with better data.
And that's where this story leaves us. It ends with this incredibly provocative question. It suggests that the real conflict of our time isn't left versus right. It's between these 2 fundamental visions for civilization: the isolated bunker versus the community storehouse. And the text argues that which one we decide to build, well, that's the only question that truly matters now.